Hey guys, what is up? Kid here of Burnwell with the Shadowverse Evolved channel, bringing you another deck profile. This time on PDK Combo Dragon is what I'm calling this deck. It is a deck that I put together and been having a lot of fun with. It plays a lot of cards you normally don't see in most competitive meta decks, and then you kind of combo out with Jabberwock to end the game very quickly and when your opponent least expects it. So let's just get right into that deck profile. All right, here's the deck itself. As you can see, there's a lot of cards in here that you normally don't see being played, which I think have been kind of undervalued, or they combo very well with what you're trying to do with the deck currently. So let's just get right into it. Obviously, Bellringer Angel, solid card, consistency, drawing card on the last word. We play one of the Evo to like kind of clear some things up against our opponent early on in the game. Blazing Breath, broken one drop quick spell card, not much to say. It's Angelic Snipe that randomly becomes 4 damage later in the game instead of 2. Dragon's Nest, if you've seen the other profile, this card is very good. It kind of lets us have a turn 1 play, let it sit there and cook over time, I would say, these eggs until they can hatch into drawing a card once our overflow is activated. If we're in a really aggressive match and we need the early healing as well, you know, cracking one of these before overflow isn't the worst thing in the world if we need it to stabilize and win the game. But a lot of times you're just playing these out when you have extra play points and then cracking them later for the draw late in the game. And you know, the healing as well helps a lot. All right, so this is a card that you don't see played very often. It's a really interesting card for this deck. I like it a lot ever since I've started playing it along with PDK. So it's a 2-drop 0/1 with ward, and then on play it summons a Megalorica token, which is a 2/2 follower, and then if you have Overflow active, it gains Storm. So playing this even on turn 2, if you don't have like Oracle or something to play, it's still a pretty solid play as well, because you get a 2/2 on the board with a 0/1 ward. It's kind of like playing a 2/3, but we get to separate the parts. Having the extra random like 0/1 ward on the board too is very awkward for some decks to deal with and makes their turn quite annoying. But the big reason I really like this card is that not only once Overflow is active, it's an extra storm damage, but it combos so well with PDK. Once you develop a PDK to the board and you need to remove something, just dropping Aqua Nereid on the board is backbreaking, because it summons 2 followers for 2 play points essentially, which means it activates PDK twice, because the Megalorica is a dragon follower that gets summoned that costs less than 3 play points. So you're dealing 4 damage to the board and 2 damage to your opponent while developing your board and creating a wider board your opponent has to deal with, which is like the crazy part and the crazy value of this card. Worst case scenario, like I said, it's a 2-drop 2/3 essentially that has ward. Shapeshifting Mage is back. I think this is one of the best mid-rangey cards to be playing for PDK, because it kind of fits at any flow of your play points. If you're at Overflow, you have a 2-drop 5/5. Early game, it is removal for big things that our opponent plays, like playing against Forest, for example. If they turn to have a 5/5 on the board, this is how we get rid of it, by playing it Evo, running Shapeshifting Mage in. Solid card, once again, combos with PDK. As you see, a lot of these cards are going to be comboing with PDK a lot to activate its effects, so we get to control the board more while presenting threats on the board and going kind of wide and kind of aggro-ish in a way. Dragon Warrior, super strong card. We're playing this as a 3 of, obviously. This is how we help control the board early on. PDK combos with this card as well. We play 3 of the Evo because we have so much extra space in our Evo deck, because we didn't have to play a lot of other random stuff in the top end that needs to be Evo. So we're allowed to play 3 Dragon Warrior Evos, which means every Dragon Warrior is online. A lot of times people will not expect a 3rd Dragon Warrior, and they just kind of like lose from there. So PDK, obviously one of the key pieces of this deck. We kind of want to see this as early as possible so we can start developing a board with PDK. It being a 1/5 on 3 is still really tough to deal with. If we develop it on 3, our opponent usually has to spend it in like their entire turn just to remove this card off the board, and we don't really mind. And so like they're basically set back a turn in a sense, whereas we don't really care, because all the times we're trying to combo is later on when we get the Jabberwock turns to like pop off and hopefully high roll into Genesis Dragons in games that way. But if we're able to get a PDK to stick, it starts pressuring our opponent's life total, pressures their board. We control the board a lot more. It makes things very awkward, especially if we present this with other followers on the board. And sometimes the other followers we present with this card are more important to remove than PDK, because those followers will do so much more damage early on, whereas PDK takes time to build up and snowball. But with the things we have in this deck, PDK can get out of control very fast just having this on board. All right, Red Rage Worm. This is a card I feel like a lot of people have been undervaluing in a way, and honestly, I kind of only see it really working in this deck because of the extra support it has through playing PDK with this card. So this card is obnoxious in the sense that when it comes into play on 3, you get a 5/5 immediately. Yes, your opponent can run things into it and use spells to remove it. But the thing is, if it ever gets a turn to untap, it's so devastating. On turns where you play PDK and then the next turn you can follow up with like a Rage Worm, tap it, give it +5, so you have a 5/5 on board. It's like almost a pseudo ward that they have to deal with. It has so much health, which is so annoying for this card. Means that it's just an annoying card with really good stat lines that your opponent has to usually dump 2 cards to remove it around turn 3 and 4, unless they have a spell that deals 5 damage or completely removes the card. But a lot of times you'll find out your opponent doesn't always have the answer, and you get to untap with a 5/5 that also came into play if you played it on turn 4 or 5 or so forth, and have a PDK developed on the board already. It's dealing damage to the board and dealing damage to your opponent's life total and being a 5/5 on top of that. It's obnoxious, and even late in the game, it becomes a 10/5, which is still like, hey, look, if you let me untap with this 10/5, you're going to eat 10 face and lose the game. It's pretty obnoxious. Sybil of the Waterworm, we're still playing this card because we still have a top end that if the game goes long and we hit 9 play points, we can start slamming Genesis Dragons that are in our hand if need be. Otherwise, card's still super good. Like I said in all the other profiles, playing this early is fine. Combos with PDK very well. At the end of turn, you get a heal 1, so it gets aggro matchups, which is healing and healing and healing every turn. If we hit Overflow, we get to accelerate our play points, along with this becoming a 4/5, which is annoying for opponent. And then we heal 2 every turn from that point on. Super solid card overall. I really like this card. It's obnoxiously good. Yeah. Serpent's Wrath, we're still playing this card. You know, Forest having a 5/5 on turn 2 is pretty annoying if they high roll that. This removes a lot of standing flaws we wanted to deal with. And also, you know, drawing a card is really good. It's a 3-drop quick spell. It's obnoxious. This card's good. If you play Dragon, you've been playing this since set 1. Dark Dragoon Forte. So this is a card in the deck, honestly, that in some instances, you might actually not want to play this card at all. I've opted to play it because I still think it's very good in this deck. But if you're looking to high roll your opponent and like blow them out, you could cut this card completely and go ahead and play the 3-drop Armed Dragon that evos and deals 4 damage or 2 damage, depending if you have another on-faller on the board or not, because that card honestly combos very well with your other followers, putting them out of range of a lot of other things. Or you can, if you're worried about aggro and dealing with board a lot more, maybe you want to play Conflag in this slot. Personally, I still like Dark Dragoon Forte. It's 7 damage whenever our opponent just doesn't have a ward up and they tapped out, or doesn't even matter if they didn't tap out. This card is obnoxious. Evo, we play 3 of the Evo. Like I said, we have so much Evo space, we can just go ahead and play 3. So every Dark Dragoon Forte we see is always going to be a 7/3 Storm Aura follower hitting the board. One thing to note though, the fact that we do play Dark Dragoon Forte means we have to be a little bit careful about how we Jabberwock. Sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of things we are removing off of the board are going to be like 3 costs, 2 costs, and so forth, which means that when we cut it, it's going to cascade essentially into a Dark Dragoon Forte instead of a Genesis Dragon or even a Shenlong. Shenlong, obviously a good card. This is another card that honestly you could consider to cut completely, but I've liked it still. It's still a solid card. Even if we play our Jabberwock on like turn 7 and like kill our Sybil off of it, Sybil becomes a Shenlong. Doesn't feel too bad from that. And then if we have the play points and stuff to do, we can evo it. But yeah, these are the 2 cards that are the most awkward in the deck, in the sense that if we're trying to pop off the Jabberwock, you gotta remember that you can hit these cards. If you want to lean way more heavy into the Jabberwock stuff, like I said, you probably want to cut Forte completely. I would play the Armed Dragon 3-drop that evos and deals 4 if you have an armed fire, because I think that card is insanely good and also undervalued right now. And I think in this deck, like I said, we have a lot of sticky followers and annoying followers on the board, which means that we'll at some point be able to actually make another follower armed. So that means we're going to get the 4 damage with that card as well. And it's another card we can sack away to Jabberwock. Otherwise, if you want to play Shenlong still, because I still think it's a very solid card, and the later turns to Jabberwocking into a Shenlong feels very good. Same thing with Forte, like I said, all super good. All right, so now we're going to go on to the part that like makes the deck super spicy and you just win games randomly. Jabberwock. Jabberwock is obnoxiously good because we've kind of limited to the things in our deck that can hit the board. So the biggest thing we're looking to hit obviously is Genesis Dragon. So you can do things like, for example, we hit turn 7, we have like a PDK on board or something, or even a Shapeshifting Mage or a Dragon Warrior they can get rid of, or an Aqua Nereid even. We can go ahead, slam Jabberwock on the board, sack one of those followers, and then hopefully we high roll into one of our key pieces like Genesis Dragon, Forte, or Shenlong even. Those are all good targets, but if at any point, as long as we're sacking something that is 3 costs or more, you know for a fact you're only going to hit all the good cards. Worst case scenario, if you can hit a Jabberwock off of your Jabberwock, which is kind of funny. In some cases, you do decide to just sack the Jabberwock that you played initially to hopefully keep going to high roll into the Genesis Dragon. It is a play I've done before, and it happens sometimes, and it's hilarious when it does. Usually on like a turn 7, which you're like 1 to 2 like quote unquote turns ahead because of your ramping. A Genesis Dragon on like your opponent's turn 5 or even turn 6, it is annoying for them to like even deal with, especially when they weren't considering they're going to get hit by a Genesis Dragon. Sometimes your opponent just assumes like, okay, well, I have nothing to stop the Forte, no reason to hold play points up, so just, you know, play my stuff out, and then hopefully I can swing back after their Forte turn and they spend their entire turn Forteing me. Instead, we get a Jabberwock, sack something, go into this Genesis Dragon, hit them for 10, and now they're staring down a 7-7 and a 10-12 on the board, and they're just like, oh no, how do I even get out of this position? This is horrible. And then obviously last card, Genesis Dragon is a 3-up. This is the key card that we want to hit off of our gambling Jabberwock turns, essentially. But like I said, if you want to make sure that our Jabberwock is way more consistent, you're probably looking at cutting Dark Dragoon Forte and Shenlong. These cards, though I like them a lot, and they do add more consistency to the deck for winning games because Forte is too good, Shenlong is very good. If you want to lean heavily more into the Genesis Dragon combo play, cut those immediately, play more solid 3-drops. The ones I suggest are either you can play like a 3 of Conflag, for example, if you just want more control over the board, things like that. 3 of the Armed Dragon Follower that deals 4. That card is obnoxiously good, especially if you're consistently sticking bodies to the board, which is sometimes pretty easy with this deck. Like I said, PDK, even Red Rage Worm are cards that our opponent sometimes will ignore. Even Aqua Nereid is a card that we can leave on the board, not ward it up. A lot of times our opponent, unless they have AoE that's going to remove it also, they kind of ignore it because it just has 0 attack. So sometimes you can come down, play that Armed Dragon, pop the amulet it generates onto the Aqua Nereid, and then go ahead and Evo and deal 4 damage to something on board that way. But yeah, this deck is a lot of fun. Is it a tournament winning deck at a regional? Probably not. I don't think it's that consistent to the point that we're going to see this at regionals just roll people, but it's good enough that if you hit the high roll, you hit the Genesis Dragon, it's obnoxiously fun. It presents very big threats onto the board, which is obnoxious as well. Like I said, Red Rage Worm is a card that fits so well into this deck that also presents a huge threat to our opponent. When they stare this down, they're like, oh no, a 5/5 on 3, this is pretty annoying. Yes, they can interact with it, but at the same time, I feel a lot of the times our opponent is going to have to be trading like 2 cards, or even like, for example, they have to Dragon Warrior Evo, hit this, and then run the Dragon Warrior into it just to remove it. And on those turns, that feels so good. And then obviously Overflow, the +10 attack can get obnoxious if we get to that point and they're like, oh no, there's this 10-5 on the board, I just lost the game. It's pretty silly. Yep, with that being said, guys, hopefully you like this deck and the idea of the deck. check it out, especially since we're playing cards in here that people don't get to play very often, which I think is like a fun part about this deck. People are going to be confused on what you're playing until it's too late and you're jabberwocking Genesis Dragoning them. All right. Well, if you like this deck, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that, and hopefully we'll see you guys in the next video. Later, everyone.